Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Text 29. Aditsorannapanana Asan Kuksyantra Nadayah Nadyah Samudrascha Tayoh Tushtihi Pushtistadashraye. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. When there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. Purport. The controlling deities of the intestines are the rivers, and those of the arteries, the seas. Fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore, the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and arteries. The rivers and seas, being the controlling deities of the two, keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order. Hare Krishna. I am very happy and honored to be back in Sri Sri Radha Gopinath Mandir amongst all of you. It is always a pleasure to come back and see ever increasing devotion in terms of quality, quantity, and every aspect. The temple is gorgeous, the deity's altar are gorgeous, and the devotees are also magnificent. So it is always a source of inspiration for me to come here and go back spiritually charged. In the series of verses that are being discussed every day in the morning Srimad Bhagavatam class, this morning we are on the 29th verse of the 10th chapter. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And for those of you who may have missed the previous classes, the topic here is about the process of creation of the material world. In the beginning of this chapter, Srila Shukadev Goswami has mentioned that the Srimad Bhagavatam has 10 topics. Atra sargo visargascha sthanam poshanamutayah manmantareshanu katha nirodho muktirashrayah. So these 10 topics, which have been discussed in the earlier classes, are usually found in the main Puranas, the Mahapuranas. And the relatively less important Puranas have 5 topics at least. In other words, for a Purana to be considered a major Puran, it must have these 10 topics discussed. So the ones of less importance will have maybe fewer topics, especially at least 5. So Srimad Bhagavatam, of course, is the most important Purana amongst all the Puranas. In fact, it is the essence of all the Vedanta, all the scriptures. Sarva Vedanta Saram Hi Shri Bhagavatam Ishyate. So the Bhagavatam is the essence of Vedanta, which is the succinct conclusion of all the Vedic teachings. Veda Anta. And the Bhagavatam is the sar or the essence of even that. So we can imagine how important the Srimad Bhagavatam is. The first 9 topics are intended to serve the 10th topic, Ashrayaha. In Srila Prabhupada's words, Samam Bonam. The highest principle, that is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Shukdev Goswami starts progressively with the first topic, Sarga. Sarga meaning the main creation of Mahavishnu, wherein the Shodashakala, the 16 elements, are made. As Shukadev Goswami has mentioned earlier here, these 16 elements are the 5 Mahabhutas, earth, water, fire, air, ether. They also represent the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, which is the eyes, ears, the nose, tongue, and skin. Also the 5 Tanmatras, the 5 sense objects, which are form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So that's 15. And the 16th is the mind. So this is called Shodasha Kala. Shodasha means 16. Kala means the parts. So fundamentally, these are the 16 parts of the material creation. And Shukadev Goswami explains that in the next stage, which is Visarga, which is overseen by Brahma, mostly, that involves an interaction with these 16, amongst these 16 elements. But it all starts there, at the 16 elements, and that happens at the level of Mahavishnu. And it has also been mentioned that when the Lord desires, and the verse is a continuation of the previous ones. So when the Lord desired something, then it happened. Because that is the supreme nature of the Lord. Whatever He desires can happen. So it doesn't need effort. Simply by desiring, the Lord can fulfill whatever He wants. So it's interesting to note that in all the previous verses and even here, everything is of the same pattern. First, there is a desire. So when there was a desire to have food and drink, so here we are speaking about the Lord about to manifest the Virat Roop or the universal form. So fundamentally there is a desire. Then when that desire was there, then the facility for fulfillment of that desire also had to come. So when the Lord was creating this material creation, so He had this desire as His Virat Roop to eat and drink. So now what has to be eaten and drunk? So something needs to be there to be enjoyed. So those are the Tanmatras. Tanmatras means the objects of the senses. And what are the means of enjoying those Tanmatras? The senses. So you need something to be enjoyed and you need something with which you can enjoy those things. So your desire is fulfilled in these two ways. But there's another interesting aspect brought out in these verses, which is that there is also a regulating entity. Whenever we create something, we also create something to regulate it. When somebody manufactures a car, he also puts in brakes into the car. He also has some kind of mechanism to regulate it. So similarly, when the Lord in the Virat Rupa is manifesting all these desires and arrangement for the fulfillment of the desires, He also arranges regulation. So for the purpose of regulation, we have the Devatas, the demigods. And you may have heard names like Varuna, Indra. Now, for those of you who thought a little more about it, one question would have come to your mind. What is that question? Huh? How did they exist before even Brahma? Right? Indra, Chandra, Varuna, all these are demigods who are creations of Brahma. And Brahma has not even been born at this stage of the Sarga. Only the 16 elements of material nature have been formed. And they will now interact, and then the universes will be formed and the successive stages will happen. So how come we are hearing about the demigods here like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, etc.? So the answer is that these are another category of demigods. They are not the category of demigods we normally hear who live in Swargaloka, who are in the level of our universe, within our universe. These are also living entities, but they exist at the level of Mahavishnu at that platform. They are the original prototype Indras, prototype Varuna, just like we have a Lord Shiva in each universe, and the prototype is Shambhu, who exists at the level of Mahavishnu. So we have these original demigods who are there at that time, and they will also have existence in some form in the coverings of the universe, as we will see in various parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So there are various levels of demigods, and they exist at different levels of the whole creation to perform a regulatory function. At every stage, they will be there to see that everything is controlled. Of course, they are never independent, as also we have seen Shukadev Goswami saying. They are servants of the Supreme Lord. They will act in according to His direction and His wishes. But nevertheless, they are very empowered and they can do wonderful things. So now, desire is the foundation of everything. In the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we see Lord Krishna speaking of the example of the inverted banyan tree, where the roots are upwards and the branches are downwards, which is contrary to our experience, where the roots are down in the ground and the branches are up above. So Srila Prabhupada explains that such a tree is found in a reflection in the water. Let's say a tree on the bank of the river is reflected in the water in an inverse way. So similarly, everything that we find here is a perverted reflection of that which exists in the spiritual world. So everything needs a surface of reflection. So when you look into the mirror and you see your reflection, there is a surface, there is a glass, the mirror that is reflecting. So if the material world and the phenomena we see here, the qualities we see here, are perverted reflections of what is happening in the spiritual world, the question can be asked, what is the surface of reflection? So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport in that section that the surface of reflection is desire. So desire is the foundation of everything. That is why Srila Prabhupada so strongly criticized those philosophers who advocated the path of thoughtlessness or desirelessness as an objective, that we perform meditation to be thoughtless or desireless. Such things are not possible for conscious living entities. When we are conscious, we must have desire. Otherwise, there is no meaning to life or to consciousness. We are not dead stone. Actually, even certain types of stones have life. And interestingly, in the Shilpa Shastra, when deities are fashioned, at least traditionally, maybe it doesn't happen all the time in the modern world, but traditionally, strictly, that is how it was supposed to happen. And that is how it happened for Lord Narasimha's deity in Mayapur, that you can select only certain types of stone which are called living stone, which have a soul. But they are too densely covered by the mode of ignorance. They are even lower than the trees and the plants. So even some stones have life, but their consciousness has become so dulled by the mode of ignorance, they are practically dead. But in any case, life means desire. So therefore, to advocate a path of desirelessness is completely wrong and futile. However, what needs to be done is to channelize the desire from material desire to spiritual desire. And that is what Krishna consciousness is all about. By engaging our senses in Krishna's service, automatically everything manifests. Ataha Shri Krishna Namadi na bhavet grahyamendriyahi sevonmukhehi jivvado svayameva spuratyadaha. The material cannot grasp the spiritual. Only the spiritual can understand the spiritual. So we are in a peculiar situation where we are so covered by material intelligence and material phenomena that we are not able to understand anything on the spiritual platform. So what is the way out for us? So here is a hopeful verse that just engage your senses in Krishna's service. Sevon mukhehi jivvado svayam eva spuratyadaha. So the automatic manifestation of that spiritual understanding and realization will happen when these gross senses are engaged in the service of Lord Krishna, and thereby they become spiritualized. Ordinarily, the gross senses, grahya indriyahi, cannot understand spiritual substance. But they can slowly, step by step, begin to do that by the process of being engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. So that is how the desire can also be gradually transformed. It is usually never an overnight process or an immediate process. It is a lifetime. In fact, many lifetimes of cultivation that are required. So desire, and then there is a means of fulfillment. For that we need intelligence, because the intelligence will work out how it is to be fulfilled. I am hungry, so where is prasadam available? So I will start looking. I have to cook this, I have to procure it from somewhere. So all of these things are intertwined. And therefore it is by the working of all of these together that eventually the subsequent creation also happens. Interesting point here is that the deities for the intestines are the rivers, and the deities for the arteries is the ocean or the seas. So I don't know, I hope it perhaps is a realm of speculation, but at least I can say there is this verse from the Bhagavatam to back my statement. So if you take care of your rivers, you'll take care of everybody's intestines and digestive problems. Maybe something for research in the medical field. Now we are polluting our rivers, we are drying them up, we are mistreating our rivers really badly. That's another whole topic to discuss. Very sad state of affairs. The rivers are lifelines for us. And for us, here they are sacred. Every river is sacred. They have some or the other role to play in the Lord's pastimes. So it's interesting that the rivers, the deities of the rivers are also controlling deities for our intestines. So if we look after our rivers and the deities of the rivers are happy, then maybe they who control our intestines and digestive system will see that everything goes well. So this is another reason why we should take care of our rivers, by the way. And also the oceans. We are polluting our oceans like anything. There are so many articles that you will find on this. We dump all our plastic there, all the sewage, everything goes from the rivers into the seas. The ships that go out, they dump so many things there. So it is quite an unpleasant situation. So perhaps, and we are drilling oil and doing all kinds of things there, ugra karma, in the oceans as well. Anyway, this is just an interesting point that emerges from this verse. The focus on this, however, is food and drink. So I'd like to speak something about that, especially in the context of intestines and arteries, and how Srila Prabhupada says here that fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. In one purport in the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada says that food has three purposes. First is to increase bodily strength. Second, to increase the duration of life. And third, to purify the mind. Now, please note that taste is not included in any of these three. Interesting, Prabhupada doesn't mention that gratification of the tongue is one of the purposes of food. Of course, there must be some degree of taste in the food for us to be able to relish it and eat it. But primarily, it is to survive, to increase strength and energy by which we can exist and perform our functions. And when we eat well, then we will be healthy and we will live a good long life, destiny permitting, of course. But the third point, the most important point that Srila Prabhupada makes, which the modern world doesn't recognize at all, is that a function of food is to purify the mind. And purification of the mind is essential for spiritual development. So we know about prasadam, and prasadam is a topic in itself. In the Bhagavad Gita purports, around the time of Yajñartha Karmana Unyatra, around that part in the 3rd chapter, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport one verse about why food is pure. Ahara Shuddho, all of you I think know it. Ahara Shuddho, Sattva Shuddhihi, Sattva Shuddho, Dhruva Smritihi, then Smriti Labdha Sarvagrantinam Vipramokshaha. So Ahara Shuddho, by Shuddha Ahar, or Shuddha, pure food, Sattva Shuddhihi, our existence gets purified. Sattva Shuddho Dhruva Smritihi. By purification of existence, the finer tissues of the brain get energized and purified. And as a result of that, then our inclination towards spiritual life increases. We become more inclined towards spiritual life. Sarva Grantinam Vipramokshaha. So we move in the path towards liberation. Does anybody know where this verse came from? Prabhupada cites this frequently, and also in his Bhagavad Gita purport. Where is this coming from? Amrit Bindu Upanishad. And also, it has reference in the Chandogya Upanishad. Also another Upanishad that Prabhupada cites often, along with a few other Upanishads. So I'd like to narrate a pastime or an event that is described in the Chandogya Upanishad that is quite relevant to our topic today. There was a sage called Uddalaka. Uddalaka had this is quite a famous episode. He had a son called Shvetaketu. So Shvetaketu went through the usual process of the Gurukula. And he learned many things. He learned how to recite the mantras of the Vedas. And he was still a young boy. And he had many questions. So Uddalaka was the father as well as the guru of Shvetaketu. So one day Shvetaketu came with some questions to his father. And Uddalaka, in the course of answering those questions, started speaking about the nature of food, what we eat and drink. Very interesting passage. He says that anna, ashita, the word ashita is used. Ashita means to eat. So the food that is eaten has three effects. The grossest part of the food, it becomes excreta or stool. That which is medium or not so gross, that becomes the flesh. And that which is subtlest of all, that becomes the mind. Then he speaks about water. Just as food that we take has three components, gross, medium, and subtle, the water that we drink also has three components, gross, medium, subtle. The grossest part of the water we drink becomes the urine, which is excreted from the system. The medium part becomes blood. And the subtlest part of the water becomes prana, a life force, which keeps us alive. And then he mentions a third item, which is tejaha, which is fire. So some commentators, and I'll speak about it later, speak about fire as a fiery element. Obviously, what does it indicate? It's a bit of a question mark. But some people say it indicates those kinds of foods like butter, ghee, oil, which rejuvenate the body and give some strength and vitality. So, Uddalaka says that fiery food that is eaten, the word ashita is used here also. So, it is a question of some food stuff. It's not just some radiation or something like fire. It is to be eaten, something that is taken in through the mouth. So, that also has three components. The grossest part of that becomes the bone. The medium part becomes the marrow of the bone, majja. And the subtlest part becomes speech. So in this way, Uddalaka explains the three categories of food: earth, water, and fire elements in food, and the effects they have in the body. So I'll revise it again. Okay? So according to the Chandogya Upanishad, food has three categories: gross, medium, and subtle. The gross part of the food becomes excreta. The medium part of the food becomes flesh. The subtle part becomes mind. Water also has three categories. The grossest part becomes urine. The medium part, blood. The subtlest part, prana, the life force. As far as fire food, so let's say foods that generate vitality, etc., the gross part becomes the bone. Subtle part becomes, or rather the medium part becomes marrow. And the subtle part becomes the speech. So those who speak a lot, you should have some ghee and oil, and so the power of speech, the voice, all that will help, I suppose. So actually, when one of our devotees had some issues with the bone marrow, and he was being treated at Bhaktivedanta Hospital also. And then later, I recalled this passage, which I had read many years back actually. And I located that section again. Then I called up the devotee who was sick. And I told him, please speak to that Ayurvedic doctor who cured you. And tell him that your disease is of the bone marrow. Wasn't it of the bone marrow? Yes. So here it says that the medium part of water, or rather fiery foods, tejaha, it strengthens the marrow. So could this be the seed of some kind of remedy for such things? So if we understand these three verses from that Upanishad, will we not be able to help people, even devotees or otherwise? So then the Ayurveda people, they looked into it, and they said, this is philosophy, it's not Ayurveda, so we can't really say what it is. Maybe it's a subject of research. Somebody should do that. If somebody has diseases of the bone, then what does this verse actually imply? That foods that are teja, that they will strengthen the bones, the medium part will strengthen the marrow, and the subtlest part will strengthen the speech. So vak also. So it's very interesting. Each of these elements can be studied in great detail by those who are expert in that and able to do this kind of research. That needs some kind of application of mind and some knowledge of medicine and all of these things. But it's very interesting. So anyway, Shvetaketu, being very young, is not able to grasp it. So he asks, really, this is too heavy for me to understand. Can you please simplify everything? Because he concludes by saying, Shvetaketu, or rather Uddalaka says, the essence of food is the mind, the essence of water is prana, and the essence of teja is speech. So then Shvetaketu asks for more clarification. So then he says, consider the process of making butter or ghee. He says, first you have milk. Then you curdle the milk, it becomes yogurt. Then you churn the yogurt, you get butter. And of course we know that from butter then we get ghee. So butter or ghee is the essence of milk. In the same way, he explained there are certain processes that happen within the body. Once you take the gross food, the anna, certain processes happen that transform that food in various ways, at various levels, gross, medium, subtle. And therefore, by churning, curdling, churning, eventually that food is transformed into the mind. Some people have commented that with the food, the subtle part of it goes in through the bloodstream, and that is where the connection between the intestines and the arteries come up. That ultimately the subtle part of the food goes into the bloodstream, goes into the heart, and then through that energizes the entire being, the mental state. So all these are actually basis of research for people who are in that field. I wish some qualified people could take up this. There is so much in our Vedic scriptures that can help a human society. So he explains it like that. He's still not able to understand it. He's very young, Shvetaketu. So he says, okay, now let's perform an experiment. He says, I want you to fast for 15 days. Exactly 15, not 16 and not 14. Exactly 15 days. Fast from food. But you must drink plenty of water. Don't stop drinking water. So, there are different levels of fasting, right? Normally, we have different, one is a nirjala fast, without water. Another fast is a sajala fast, with water and nothing else. Then saphala, with fruit and water but no grains. And on Ekadashi we follow another system where we fast from grains, beans, etc. So he said, you do a sajala fast. Only take water, but don't take any anna. No earth item, no food should go in. And you come back to me after 15 days. So dutifully, Shvetaketu does that. He comes back. And have you followed everything I said? Yes. Have you eaten anything? No. Have you drunk water properly? Yes. Now, Shvetaketu, you recite the Vedas. And Shvetaketu is not able to recite a single verse. So the father says, you had memorized all the verses of the Vedas. You knew thousands of verses. How is it you're not able to remember even one verse right now? Okay, now you go and eat food and come back. So then Shvetaketu goes and eats food and comes back. And he says, yes, now Shvetaketu, are you feeling satiated, eating proper food? He says, yes. Now recite the verses. And he's able to recite. He recites the verses. Now, I'm not suggesting anything here. And least of all, that if we are to increase our memory, we should go on eating. Too much bhojan is not good for bhajan anyway. But I am just stating what is there in the Upanishads because it is indicative of some philosophical points. So then Uddalaka explains to Shvetaketu and says that look, the mind has 16 parts. If you remember in the earlier part of the talk, I spoke about Shodashakala, 16 elements of material nature. In the 6th canto, 1st chapter, I think, of the Bhagavatam, also there is another mention of this Shodashakala, 16 parts, but that relates to the subtle body or the mind. And there you don't have the 5 elements, material elements, Mahabhutas, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Instead, you have the senses, the working senses also, which are in subtle form. So those 16 elements, the subtle body or the mind also has 16 parts. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Hare Krishna, please come. So the mind also has 16 parts. Okay? So now Uddalaka is explaining to his son Shvetaketu that I asked you to fast for 15 days, not 16 days. Because I gave you water, I asked you to drink water. Because water will take care of what? Your prana. If you hadn't drunk water, you wouldn't have survived. You have survived without food, but you would not have survived without water, because water is necessary to keep the prana in the body. When the prana leaves the body, then that is death. But still, I asked you not to go beyond that, because then even beyond that, there is a limit to the body. So, I also asked you to not eat food, because the finest part of food is the mind. And because you didn't eat food, and there was only a little bit left one day, so your mind is there, of course, it's not lost, but the effectiveness or the efficiency of the mind has diminished very greatly. So much so that you were not even able to remember the verses you had nicely memorized earlier. Because the mental functioning is affected when you don't have food too much. If it's a prolonged period, then you may not be able, your mind may not function nicely, including the ability to memorize or to remember from the past, etc. So he said, that is the reason I wanted to prove to you that prana is necessary, water is necessary to maintain the prana. So prana is the essence of water. And when you didn't eat food, you couldn't remember, so the mind was not functioning. So actually the mind is the finest essence of the food. In this way, with this experiment, Uddalaka explained to Shvetaketu about food and how it is so important to purify the mind and make it go ahead on the path of spiritual development. So we also understand this principle very well. It is so important, therefore, for us to control our food, and not just in terms of eating outside or anything like that, but also the right kind of food, which is sattvic in nature. If you're eating foods that are rajasic also, it will have the corresponding nature. That we all know by experience and by observation and also by hearing from the Shastra. We will not get into the detailed discussions of what Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita on the 3 categories of foods according to the modes of nature. So suffice it to say that there is a whole science of food. What Ayurveda says on food is another huge subject with more qualified Ayurveda practitioners can speak more authoritatively on. But as far as the other scriptures like the Upanishads are concerned, this is a very interesting passage that is connected. And it also links up the digestive system with the circulatory system, the arteries, because the finest essence of the food, it goes in, enters into the blood, and therefore energizes both the systems. So here are some few thoughts. And of course, it's a very technical section of the Srimad Bhagavatam here. Further also, we will see the various ways in which the different organs, the different tanamatras also are created in the process of creation. So I think we'll stop here for questions or comments. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, I've been very curious about this. You just mentioned Narasimhadev's deity was, carved from a living stone. And at the same time, you mentioned that the living stone, the consciousness is very, very, low. It's lower than the trees. So I just wanted to understand, how if the consciousness is so low, and then we use that stone to carve a deity like Narsingadev. So I just wanted to, if you can help me to understand that. Thank you.
You see, how does a piece of stone or a slab of stone become a deity? It's because Krishna wishes it to happen, and he does so at the request of the deities. That is what the Prana Pratishtha ceremony is. At the heart of the Prana Pratishtha ceremony, the procedures and mantras and everything aside, what is really at the heart of the Prana Pratishtha is the devotion or the devoted call, the pleas of the devotees for the Lord to manifest himself in stone or wood or whichever that substance is of which the deity is carved. That is the reason the Lord manifests. He can manifest in any substance he wants, whether it's living stone, dead stone, whether it's wood or anything else. But the Shilpa Shastra generally talk about which kinds of stones you can use for carving deities. But for Krishna, he is supremely competent to enter into anything and become the deity in any substance. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes, one mic here, please.
Thank you, Maharaj, for that extremely wonderful class. Maharaj, in the verse that you quoted from the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Srila Prabhupada speaks of the material world reflecting in desire, is that one living entity's desire? Because then the reflection would be different according to different desires. Or is it Krishna's desire that the material world is reflected in?
Both. We come to a very fundamental question of why does the material world exist? Yes? Actually, one time in Mexico, one professor of philosophy or Indology or something like that, he approached Srila Prabhupada and he asked him, why does anything exist at all? Why does anything at all exist? We, the trees, this earth, the universe, why does it exist at all? Initially, Srila Prabhupada shot back and says, why not? But then gradually he answered in one word. He said, Ananda. Everything exists only for the sake of Ananda, which is bliss. So the driving force for life and continuation of life is bliss, happiness. Everyone is seeking happiness. Krishna is always happy, but because he is infinite in every aspect, therefore his happiness is also infinitely increasing. So therefore Krishna automatically also increases his happiness. And that is why he expands himself into the different jivas. His energies expand into the spiritual world, the material world, and very, very elaborate and intricate expansions and arrangements happen, all for the sake of expanding bliss. That is the one and only reason. So, why did the material world happen? Yes, the desire of the jivas is there. Is it the desire of one jiva or many jivas? Well, in general desire, but every jiva will have his desire fulfilled in some particular way. So there is scope for the fulfillment of every jiva's desire in a limited way with a lot of barriers, because that is what the material world is. We are bound with the chains of the three modes of material nature. So there are impediments in our search for happiness, very serious impediments. But nevertheless, the search continues on for happiness. So we want to find that happiness here When we understand spiritual knowledge, we realize that the happiness lies in serving Krishna. So we divert that search into the right source. Now coming to Krishna, so does Krishna have a role to play? Is it his desire also that the material world should manifest? Well, in one sense, yes, because he wants to facilitate the jivas. Because of his love for his parts and parcels, he wants to create for them a facility so that they may try to fulfill their desires. Because ultimately nothing can happen without his sanction. So he says, all right, my parts and parcels want to have this apparently separate existence, so be it. And so he has it. But there's another reason which one could call internal in terms of the Lord's desire for the material world, which is that the Lord performs pastimes in the material world that he does not actively manifest in the spiritual world. He may fulfill his desires here, which he cannot to some degree in the spiritual world. And let us also keep in mind that the material world is also a part of the spiritual world. Inasmuch as the jail is still a part of the city, part of the kingdom. Although separate sets of laws apply within the jail compared to the rest of the citizens outside, but still it's part of the king's kingdom or the government. It's within the city. So the material world is not separate from Krishna. So in that sense, Krishna is complete when there is spiritual and the material manifestation. For Krishna, there is no difference between spirit and matter. So he can manifest his pastimes anywhere. But he chooses to manifest certain pastimes here because they may not be appropriate in the spiritual world. For example, the killing of demons. There are some rumors and there is that feeling that the demons were killed and that kind of thing. But we don't find that active, manifest Leela of killing demons happening in the spiritual world, which happens here. So Krishna has these unlimited desires that he wants to fulfill. So the material world is also one avenue in which he can do that. So it is a multiple thing. It's a combination of the jiva's desires, but there's also that element of Krishna's desire. And also his desire to then reclaim all these fallen souls. He comes and performs these pastimes for his own pleasure as well as for his devotees here in the material world. Okay?
So that substance in which the spiritual world is reflected, that is Krishna. Would it be fair to say that that's Krishna's desire to facilitate his own desire and the living entity's desires?
Yes, yes. But also the jiva's desire. You see, jiva is also part and parcel of Krishna, not separate from Krishna. Okay? Some other question, somebody raised a hand there, yes, at the back.
Hare Krishna Maharaj,
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam. It was nice class. I have a couple of questions regarding this. When you say desire is the root of all our manifestations, etc., when I have heard that we have to go back to Godhead, and that is our original home. This is not our original home, and we came from there originally. So there must be a desire for something to come here originally. So what was that desire? and for example, if newly born child, say just a 1 day old, he does not have any taste of, say, chocolate. But unless and until we feed him a chocolate, he won't have a next desire to have the chocolate, right? So if we are in the spiritual world, our body must be spiritual. There is no concept of a past, so there is no concept of ego. Right? So what was that desire? Desire comes only from our past experiences. So can you tell us a little bit on this?
In the age of modern technology, everything gets transmitted instantaneously everywhere. This is what we can call the multi-million-dollar question. Better not to address it in detail here. Suffice it to say that it is an inconceivable topic. That's all I would like to say now. And there are varying opinions that you will find. And Srila Prabhupada has also expressed a variety of opinions, and he has stated certain things at different times. So let us just conclude that topic by saying it is an inconceivable phenomenon that has happened. For those who want to know more, there is possibility of doing deeper research. But for now, suffice it to say that certain things are inconceivable to understand. And as Srila Prabhupada also said that now that we are here, let us focus on how we can live. Yes? Our descent into this material world has happened because of some inconceivable phenomenon or process. We will not discuss that further.
Maharaj,
Okay? Yes.
why I was wondering this, because in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that once you reach to my home, abode, okay, no one comes back.
Yes.
So if that is true, when we were there already,
Yes.
why we came back?
Your point is very well taken. And I agree with you also. So, yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. So now that you go there, then no coming back. That much Krishna has assured. So let us be content with that assurance. Okay? Can't hear.
It also gives another fear that we are spending so much time, we want to go back to Godhead. We are putting so much effort for that. Okay, but if desire is the root cause for us to come back here, then even after going there, I may come back again here.
Krishna has already promised, as I said in Bhagavad Gita, yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. So that is Krishna's promise. Okay, so then Krishna, as Prabhupada says in one lecture, that Krishna has not advented here to speak lies. He has come here to speak the truth. So when he says that when you go to the spiritual world, you will not return to the material world, he is speaking the truth. He is not deceiving us. So that is called faith. So we have to have faith in Krishna's words. Okay?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for explaining the food. Whatever food we take, whether it is prasad or in the form of food, it is also having an effect on mind. Now the latest controversy is about the Tirupati Laddu. Like we all eat we honored the prasadam. And it is also a sense of that cheating, somebody cheated us. And in future also it is very difficult to see that prasad, to honor the prasad. Maybe in other prasadam also, you feel a little bit dilemma and confused and all. So can you just please explain?
Well, you see, we are also in the field of making prasadam and distributing. So the lessons we can learn from this is, number one, that we have to be so careful when we make prasadam, that we source the ingredients rightly, we cook it with the proper consciousness, keep everything very clean and up to the standard, because it's going to be offered to Krishna. So we have to maintain the standard of our bhoga in every respect. So that is one lesson we can learn, including where we source our ingredients from. And that is why Srila Prabhupada said that we should make our own ghee, our own We should have our own farms and we should have our own cows. Because you can't ultimately rely on what people outside are doing. Even the food, everything in this Kali Yuga is contaminated. Every item, you name it and there is a contamination there. There is no item that you use in your day-to-day life, from the most ordinary things to even the most sophisticated things, that do not have some degree of contamination. So this is the way Kali Yuga is. So we have to try to see at least that we do not become lax in this regard. We have to be very strict about where we get different kinds of ingredients and what we use. Even the spices, for that matter. It's better not to buy these packaged spices from the market. For example, we can take turmeric or haldi on Ekadashi, but it is better not to use the haldi that you buy in the market package because they adulterate it with something. So if you want to use haldi or turmeric on Ekadashis, then you get your own root of the turmeric and then you grind it, crush it, make your own powder, or get it from a source where it is not contaminated with anything, not adulterated with anything. So we have to be cautious. That's the first lesson we can learn. Well, the other second point to make is that ultimately if it has been offered to Krishna with devotion, even if it has some contaminant, what can it be done now? We have accepted it in good faith. It has been offered in good faith, hopefully, by whoever was doing the offering. So we partook of it in good faith. And Krishna is Bhavagrahi Janardhan. Hopefully he will, excuse us. But those who are responsible for it, they should be careful that it is not done in the future. Okay? I will not get into the political aspects of it. Yes. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Maharaj, for a very enlightening class. Related to food, actually this question was related to food, bit technical in the sense that we hear, and when we preach also we say sometimes that actually science proves the existence of a creator. More you analyze what is happening in the material world, scientifically, you are able to actually establish there must be a designer, there must be a creator. The same way if you look at food, I mean, the food that was consumed, it's always been consumed since time immemorial. But over the last, 30, 40 years, a lot of research has been done on food. And they have found that it is composed of 4 main components. There is protein, there is fats, there is carbohydrates, there is fiber, like that. And every food has got a different combination of one of these 4 items. And when it is consumed, the body is able to break it up into protein, fruits, fiber, that. While we are able to scientifically see this, we find it even more fascinating and amazing that how has this creation been done? Which has got all these elements. It's got DNA. People analyze DNA and they see that it actually carries information from one cell to another. So it's inconceivable that all this was created. It has to be created, otherwise it's not possible. But how do we understand that Brahma created all this, and it's still being discovered by scientists till date? How do we understand this? Just if you can.
We can't. It is impossible to understand. Krishna's acts are inconceivable. Srila Jiva Goswami has said that it is not possible to understand Krishna unless you accept the principle of Achintya Shakti, that he has Shakti that is inconceivable, that is beyond our imagination and understanding. We can try to, with our modern understanding and techniques and theories, break down something and analyze it. It has protein, or we can give it names and labels, and we can define it in this way or that way. But ultimately, it's one angle of vision. The Bhagavatam looks at it as earth, water, fire, air. So there are different angles of vision about this. Whichever way you look at it, ultimately how this whole thing was brought together has been described in the Bhagavatam, but only in a very summarized fashion. Just the bare outline of it has been given, not even that, just the bare skeleton of it. Because it is simply impossible for us to understand these things. Even to say that, okay, mind came into existence, then the three modes were undifferentiated, then they became differentiated, and then false ego emerged, and then the senses, subtle senses, what do they mean? It is beyond our imagination, because we tend to think in physical terms. So, the tanmatra, it must be something physical. We want an object. But everything doesn't exist only in the gross dimension. So everything moves from subtle to gross. So gradually that is how the creation happens. So even to understand the gross aspect of life, we are finding it so hard. We are not able to do it. We have so many theories, but we can't crack it. Just imagine how difficult it is to go into the subtler aspects that underlie the gross aspects. So in one sense, it is not really possible to understand this. But to the extent the Shastras tell us, we try to assimilate it and understand it to the degree that we can. We can also utilize modern knowledge and analysis to the degree it doesn't conflict with our beliefs. For example, if the modern system tells you must take some animal flesh, cow meat or something to cure this, we wouldn't do that. But in terms of other analysis, for example, allopathy, the modern medical system, it may not be an analysis from the point of view of the Bhagavatam, but it is something that is also helpful. So we can also take help from that and see that ultimately these people are also given intelligence by Krishna. They're using material from the material energy and using it. So if it is for the sake of something that is beneficial, ultimately, then there is no harm using it, but it has to be done a little carefully. Okay? Hare Krishna. So I think we'll stop here. It's 11 o'clock. So thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.